Hello, I am Anawiltos, and today I am with OmegaEmerson, and we're talking about some politics. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, hey everybody. I'm OmegaEmerson. I am a sophomore in college, and I'm just here to talk about some politics and have some fun.
All right, so the topic we were just talking about is classical liberalism, and are the current political parties interested in it? Is there anyone nowadays that is still a classical liberal? And which direction is politics generally going? So this is a question you asked me. I would say that when it comes to the two main political parties, the one that is closer to classical liberalism would be the Republican Party, especially when you talk about Tea Party and paleocons to some extent, and what people call conservatarians, who are essentially libertarian but with more conservative values. However, there's also the Libertarian Party itself, which has been gaining members recently as well. However, when it comes to the Democratic Party, I would say that there's not a lot of classical liberalism. I think most members of a Democratic Party are at least social democrats or social liberals, um, and at the very fringes, at the end, you've got some communists there, and you've got every shade in between, I'd say.
I would agree with that. I think the classical liberalism right now. Classical liberalism is something that both parties, if they embraced it, they would have much more support. It's, to use an analogy, it's in the Hunger Games, it's the cornucopia, it's in the very center of the battlefield, and except everyone's running from it. Some people are on the right are moving closer to it, some are moving further away. On the left, everyone seems to be going away. There's not much popular support for it anymore, and it seems like it's a pretty basic idea that if anyone were to embrace it more, it would behoove both parties to gain more of a moderate support.
Yeah, and I think a big opposition to classical liberalism would be the idea of social democracy, where individuals prefer to have a lot of safety nets, and they prefer a more collectivized charity rather than an individualistic system of charity.
I would agree. I think that the reason why a lot of people on the right are staying away is the social programs. Um, that's not to say there aren't good parts of it, which does also for me. I'm a much more libertarian, as I've told you before, on government intervention. But I do think that if at least the aspects of it, that so many parts of it are about the culture. I think those are the parts for grabs, because I think whether or not the left or the right embrace the social programs parts of the classical liberalism, I think that would matter much less than either party going towards the personal aspects and their current ramifications with a lot of issues like transgender, transracial, and I think a lot of those things, the Libertarian Party is kind of more embracing. Although I think all parties are just not doing a good job of trying to reach across and try to win more support.
Yeah, I think a big problem here is that this entire system of whether we're going to go for more social democracy or democratic socialism, or perhaps classical liberalism, or more classical liberalism with more conservative values and all that. I think what's really causing a lot of conflict here is that this is happening on a nationwide level. In other words, it's a zero sum game where only one system is the system that will win out with the current political atmosphere. In other words, I think that something that would go a long ways to solving this issue is if social and economic issues, instead of being national issues, were local issues. This would allow different systems to coexist in the same country, and would, in theory, also allow them to compete, and therefore systems that are more successful are also going to proliferate more. But individuals that prefer a more socialized system or a heavily liberal system, by liberal I mean classically liberal, uh, those individuals can both coexist under this idea. But that certainly would require the central government to give up a lot of power for that to happen.
I do agree. I think the term federalism gets a lot of bad buzz nowadays, but I think that's exactly what we need more of because you've got states like Texas, which have no state tax for as long as anyone can remember, and they have a booming economy. And you have things like California, which they have chosen to do many social programs, to do a lot of welfare, a lot of homeless effort, a lot of social justice efforts, and gun control and whatever. And it's their right to do whatever they choose to do democratically. But you have two states which are very similar in terms of the business respects that are doing so differently in performance. I think that's totally fine. I've never got what people think. People disagree with me, therefore I must mandate that they believe what I believe. I think one reason that people have both been just so polarized is I don't think I've ever heard of politics shifting so quickly. Because both parties, there's like, just think 5 years ago, socialism was a bad buzzword, and then Bernie happened, and then immediately you had this swing because he was a very charismatic, likable guy. I know people trash Bernie, but he is the grandpa everyone wants. Bernie seems like a nice guy.
Yeah,
but one
feel the
thing
burn.
is, feel the burn, definitely. All the fun Bernie memes. Because he's not technologically savvy, but
Yeah,
he
but
embraced it and he ran
what I
with
like
it.
about him is that he's honest about what he wants. And
Yes, he's not trying to charade socialism in this. Of course, he has the whole "we're doing it for the
yeah,
people,"
and
which
he's
he
not a full
actually
socialist. I think that's actually
no.
a mislabeling. He's more what people would call, he's not a democratic socialist, he's a social democrat, which is more
I
of
agree with
a
that.
light version of that, where he wants a lot of social programs, but he doesn't want to fully socialize the economy
He doesn't
like
want to
an
seize
actual
the means
socialist
of
would.
production.
Yeah.
So I think because I think he mislabeled himself, and I think that's a lot of the bad buzz for Bernie comes from is socialism, which he could have easily avoided. I think social democrat is more of the good way to say it, but I think with people like Trump came and just flipped politics on its head. Because you had people like I think Hillary Clinton was the most like inevitable president ever. And I think she didn't campaign enough. Bernie hurt her enough. Everything just changed so radically because Republicans were fired up after Obama. Republicans were really fired up and wanted to change, and Trump was so much change so quickly. And then Bernie came in. I just think this last election, it accelerated everything that was going because you had a lot of stuff sitting there, a lot of catalysts, but then it got pushed, and then everything so quickly changed. I think a lot of people now that their beliefs have changed so quickly the last 4 or 5 years, but it's not necessarily that their beliefs have changed. I'm trying to think of how to phrase it, but it's just that everything has moved so quickly. It's just kind of like a roller coaster. You hold on and go with it, and then you kind of take a step back, and it's where are we now? I think just everything has these last few years just accelerated in terms of political parties changing ideas, and especially the social parts like transgenderism, gay marriage. Kind of like with technology, it has an exponential growth in how quickly technology develops. Um, I think something just hit the spark just lit, and so much social change has come up so quickly that people are just trying to keep up with it, and I think it's throwing their politics for a loop.
Yes, and what we end up with is a lot of people, they try to hang on to something in all this change, and they end up becoming more party individuals, where they work together closely with the political party they're affiliated with, rather than looking at, let's say, their own individual values or their own personal interests. And then these parties, they crowd together, and they create an us against them mentality against each other, and that eventually leads to a bigger rift forming in society, where
I
we
agree with that. I think both parties have had to try to demonize their enemy because Obama got a lot of hate. It's like they need to focus on his politics get a lot of hate, not the guy. Because I don't think anyone who knew Obama disliked him personally, at least from what I've gathered. he was a great orator, and seemed like he was a really nice person. I have issues with so many of his policies, but I'm not going to begin to go into that. But now it turned into people were demonizing Obama, and I think that was a mistake. But also people demonized Bush. People now are really harping on Trump. I think I think one of the big issues is demonizing the person and not the policy, because I get that it's so much easier to get people fired up when you say this guy in office is horrible rather than he's doing horrible things or whatever you believe. But I think so much of it is it's gotten so personal that that's what's kind of divided. That's what's lengthened the divide between the parties is the personal attacks, not the ideological differences.
Yes, and one thing that I've noticed hasn't really happened is the normalization of the Donald Trump presidency, especially among his political opponents, and that they consider it even now. It's now 2 years in, and it's still considered to be one of the
It's an aberration,
worst events. It's terrible and everything, even though things haven't changed as much as some of them really think it has. So I would say that this is actually on a more general path of decline for the country. This increased polarization and ultimately individuals getting mad about things that eventually, in the grand scheme of things, are very minor.
I do agree. I think Trump himself has developed this sort of nuance where, because who'd ever thought we'd be saying Trump with nuance in the same sentence, but he's about as subtle as a sledgehammer. But the whole thing with that is he's a perfect example of you can not like the person, but you can like the policy. Or you can say he does a lot of dumb stuff, but he does some things right. And so I think same with any person in politics. When you take a step back and think, okay, because he's kind of how I got political, where I didn't really care. But then I saw so much stuff happening. I was like, I kind of want to get involved and see what's going on. I got really interested. But it's turned into you hate someone in everything they do, which on both parties serves no one. Because whenever I try to talk to someone, I will have a discussion with anybody from any political aisle, communist, someone who's very far right. I'll do moderates. I'll talk to anybody, and because I love the exchange of ideas. But I think it's turned into something where it's someone on the other side, you just can't communicate with them because it's we have no common ground. You come in with a notion of we agree on nothing because you support this horrible person. It's like, well, okay, hang on. Yes, Trump's terrible in terms of his person. I don't think many people like him. I think people that know him like him, but I think people that just when they hear he doesn't do a lot of good stuff personally. But let's talk policy because we just hit, was it a 49-year low in unemployment? We just hit a bunch of these good goals economically. Let's talk about policy, not the person. I think in the long term, policy matters more because policy will outlive the person.
Yeah. And I think something that's really happening nowadays with how divided society is we're seeing people on both sides, starting with the very extremes, the far left, the far right, with Antifa and the skinheads are already becoming more militant, especially in inner cities. But it's only a matter of time until eventually the division between the two big subcultures in the country is going to become so great that the militancy starts becoming more mainstream. And then you'll really have a bleeding Kansas situation like before the Civil War. And that may eventually lead to increased polarization even further until the country has a critical moment.
I do agree. So, especially with the division right now, do you think it'll hit an extrema and then shoot back together? Or do you think it's going to go until there's this huge schism that you can't cross from? Because I know a lot of people are hyping up there's going to be a second Civil War, and I severely doubt that. But because everyone's so instantly gratified now, no one is willing to get up and fight. And there's no need to, because it's all ideological differences. It's like,
yeah, and the only people that are really out there trying to fight are right now the very extremes.
Yes, and the thing is, both the extremes, left and right, are the exact. I think politics people think it's a straight line. I've compared it more to a circle, where on the far extremes they come up at the top and then they meet. They both believe people that are colored are super special. They disagree on how. They're one of them. They're both their own sort of anarchists. They both believe in a lot of social programs. There's a lot more in common than you believe among both extrema, but both of them are. It's hard to say, but there's a lot more similarities than you would think. But I think the big issue is people just think right and left rather than okay. There's a lot of overlapping where someone can be conservative, but they also are like I think now conservatives they need a good orator because Trump is good on policy, but he's had some good speeches. I'll give him that, but he cannot convey a message like Barack Obama can, because the Republican Party needs to say we are not anti-gay, we are not anti-trans. We think you have the right to do with yourself and your lover whatever you choose as long as you're adults and it's consensual. You just cannot expect other people to change their beliefs for you. But no one can communicate that. It's turned into this whole thing of both parties just cannot talk to each other because it's either screaming or it's just demonizing, but none of them are willing to sit down and talk.
Yes, and what I think is happening is we're in what some might call the quiet before the storm. In essence, every country has a life cycle to it, and the United States is in its decline phase. And eventually, we're going to reach a point like the French did, where in France, before the French Revolution, there wasn't actually quite a bit of conflict. It was relatively peaceful, but suddenly the one event after the other led for the divisions that had existed in the society to fully rip it apart. And that's eventually going to happen to the United States. And at this point, it's not really a matter of whether it will happen, it's more of a matter of when it will happen.
I don't think it'll be a societal rip as much as it'll be a party rip because, again, I think everyone has so many things they agree on fundamentally. They just disagree on the nuance of it. But I think it's going to go to the part where it's going to where okay, the left. I think eventually they're going to have to decry and just cut ties with Antifa, and the right is going to have to stop because even with Trump, like I don't think anyone is pro-Nazi other than the 12 people that were at March for the Right, which, gosh, it's horrible. But again, what were there, 12, 15? But everyone can believe what they want to believe. And I understand the premise behind Antifa, where it's we're anti-fascist. That's great. So we're going to beat them into submission. No, that is fascism. I think the issue people have is not with the overall society. It's because again, with the left, there's a lot of these beliefs people see radical, but it's okay. You can believe whatever you want. When it becomes, I think the forcible conflicts, whether it's March for the Right or whether it is Antifa, I think those are going to be the parts that ties are going to be severed forth. And I think there's going to be a lot less political activism at some point. I think we're going to get to the point where there's going to be the schism among the parties. As you see, there's a lot more third-party growth now more than ever because people who, like, I never got why you would sign yourself to an ideology where it's, okay, I am Republican until I die. I'm Democrat until I die. But I was asked by a professor, which was very inappropriate, but I was basically taken aside and saying, well, what do you believe politically before she graded my paper? It's like, on Marxism. It's like, I'm a libertarian. It's like, I don't want to pick sides here. She asked me, who would you vote for? I was like, I'd vote for the better candidate. If someone was on the left and they had better policy, I'd vote for them. If someone's on the right with better policy, I'd vote for them. I don't see why you would sign yourself to blue or red. It's like, what if you like the person? That's why I think the schism isn't going to be this huge societal collapse. I think it'll be a point where both parties reform, or at least where they cut ties with the most extreme. Because I think everyone needs to demonize things like Antifa and the neo-Nazis, because I think it's to the point where both parties are trying to maintain all the voters they can rather than maintain their identity. Because who would have thought people like Ben Shapiro, Sam Harris, and Sargon of Akkad are all being put together as neo-Nazis?
And they're not.
No, it's like you have a Jew, like a capitalist Jew, you have Sargon of Akkad who's a liberal, and then you have an anarchist. And you have all three of them. I think people on the left are just forcing people on the right to form these like ties, and the people, okay, we all disagree, but we're all not them. I think both parties I think the right is accidentally finding this foothold of people of different ideologies where they all can say we all disagree and we're okay with that. I don't think it'll be the societal collapse. I think society will live on. I think it'll be a reform of government, but I think it might have this huge, like, violent outburst. It might get to a point where it's going to cause a shutdown of things like Antifa and a more like outcry against these things. But outcry and action are two different things. You're going to need some point where things get so heated that it's going to be this big event, and then Antifa, and then March for the Right. All these things are just going to be stopped because, and I don't think they should be physically stopped. I think they need to be cut ties, defunded, but I don't think they should be, until they break the law, should not be arrested or not be detained.
Yeah, that's a good thing to
For sure, yeah.
yeah. And
I don't see the societal collapse coming from these. From I get that there's these political ideologies that are so different.
yeah, and I'm not saying that it's the radical ideologies that'll destroy the society. What I'm saying is that it is the general public that will eventually be galvanized by the political parties that split with each other, that will eventually end up being in open conflict. As we have seen in many countries throughout history, time and time again, I see this happening in the United States now.
Where do you see it going? Do you think it'll be a collapse completely and then a reform? I think things like the Electoral College, I'm not saying it should go, but I think it should be reformed. I agree with the non-democratic vote because we saw that with Greece. Pure democracy is never a good thing in terms of a massive country. It's great for kids and who gets to like be quarterback on the playground, but I think it. I would be more for like a district a voting thing. I'd be more for like reforming how much electoral vote states have, but I don't. Because there's been this, everything has turned into an outrage where it was Trump won the college, not the vote. Let's get him on that. It's like, well, okay, he said Bush and Gore, same thing, but I think politics has gone from being someone's like back pocket. It's come into the household where it's become so mainstream to be political, and I think just this 2016 election, especially, is what accelerated that whole process of making everyone just innately more political. And I think that's causing everyone to be more tribal, where I can only identify with my tribe and my people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the problem with when it comes to direct democracy is not only is it easy to manipulate people using mass media, but even if there is no manipulation going on, a lot of individuals simply don't take the time to learn about what they're voting for. So I think ideally any system that requires voting or that requires a leader to be chosen would have a system that allows for an intelligent selection process. And for that purpose, I have formulated an idea of a sort of layered democracy wherein most of the social and political issues would be, of course, put on a local level so people can directly vote on the things that affect them most in their lives. But then when it comes to international relations and the military, those are on higher levels. And the lower levels of government then vote for the intermediate levels of government, which vote for the higher levels of government. And this system would ensure that everybody who is voting for a higher level of government has some political expertise, and therefore the more layers there are, the higher probability there is that the person on top is going to be an expert in what he's doing when it comes to politics. And at the same time, by actually giving this power to the governments to vote for those above them, it also highly reduces the chance of them reducing their own power and giving it to a higher power. And I think that really would solve certain problems.
I think that'd be a fun discussion to go into the whole, how that would happen, how you would nominate, or if people would even nominate the the whole how you get to the top layer. That'd be a fun discussion to have. I think something like that would be a good idea. It'd be hard to transition from one form to another completely, though. But I do definitely agree. State and local should handle state and local because I think the divide now. I think a lot of people do think the president should be the emperor, which that is the same with the Supreme Court has gotten more and more powerful over the years, which it was never designed to do that. It was designed to determine whether laws were constitutional or unconstitutional. It was never designed to make social statements like Roe v. Wade or the case for gay marriage. I think both of
and
I don't think marriage in general should be a legal thing, but for the Roe v. Wade, it's like okay, that was an enumeration of the penumbra of the right to privacy. That's when it's like okay, but let people make the law, let people be involved. Now the whole thing is well, if the court decides Roe v. Wade's gone, it's done for. Rather than having state and local all be able to decide, okay, we all agree, each state they can determine for themselves what the people there want, rather than being this huge national issue for something the court was not meant to make a social law for.
Well, I think one big issue here is the way that a certain amendment to the Constitution has changed how elections are, particularly for that of senators, because it used to be that the senators were elected by the state governments rather than by the people of the state, and this allowed the states to actually have a voice in how the government was run. But now the senators are elected directly by the people, and that means that the state government itself has no ability to actually cause any change in the federal government. And in addition to that, I would say, in regards to the Supreme Court, I think there has been too much of a strong emphasis on case law and common law instead of civil law, to the point where, in some cases, the Supreme Court is essentially operating as a legislative body and bypassing Congress, and therefore bypassing the votes that people have cast. And I think this would be both good for the Republicans and the Democrats to get this fixed, because it means that, because now, of course, many of the Democrats are complaining about Kavanaugh because he's on the Supreme Court and he's got all of this power to do all these things that he really shouldn't
never
have.
meant to have that power. Yeah, I think the Senate and the House the Congress itself has just been gutted. I don't know. I'm not sure. I've heard like it was claiming it was during the Obama era. People during Clinton. It was during the Bush era.
No, it's been going on for a long time. It's a very gradual process. It's been evolving
for sure. I guess better would be devolving. The people have been because you get the whole part of okay, well the Senate it's gotten more and more partisan. I think that's kind of what's caused it. Where people voting along party lines, like with the Kavanaugh thing, you had 48 Democrats vote no, you had 50 Republicans or 9 Republicans vote yes. And it's just all along party lines, not about, okay, do we take these allegations to be credible or not? And for almost every law passed, it's been almost partisan every single time. It's turned, because of that, like with Obama, I got a pen and a phone, and he would just bypass that with executive order. Then Trump comes in, I like those, I'll take those orders away. All the power of the legislative branch has just been taken away. And then now, especially the courts and the executive branch have both taken some of that power away. So if you're not going to make laws, I've got a pen and a phone. Or, hey, well, we can look at previous cases and sort of make our own law based upon their thing to get change going. Because Congress moves so slow, I think it naturally moved that way. And it's hard. It's going to be really hard to get that power back to Congress.
Yes, and unfortunately, a lot of individuals aren't really patient enough to consider that the president maybe shouldn't be able to give executive orders in many of these cases, or that the Supreme Court shouldn't be able to challenge laws when they don't violate the Constitution.
For sure. It's going to be hard to get that power back, but I do think that just the process itself just takes so long. Because even if it was fast tracked, that can take months. Because you gotta get it through the Senate, get it through the House, the president's gotta sign it, and then the Supreme Court checks it. It's all of it, which is the way it's designed to be. But especially in an age where things are so quickly, like instant gratification, so quickly moving. Like, okay, I want to watch a show, I'll do it right now. people like say there's this huge issue. Let's solve it today.
Yes,
And that's not how the Congress works. And maybe they should find some way to update that to get the process going quicker than all the committees. Then it goes to the House. And all the whole every single step takes so long, especially because they're on no deadline. So I
yes,
think you can find a way to speed it up, but it's just the entire process has been it's been take people like okay, well technically the executive can make actions which then can be taken down, but he can do it today. And the courts they can do their cases, but if they want to give more power to determine change socially rather than Congress making the laws, we'll do that today. And I just think Congress it almost has no value anymore, other than for appointing nominees to the court, or I guess even voting on them. They're kind of like the FBI, where they don't have as much power as people think they do.
yes, and I think the epitome of this impatient instant gratification mentality is the way a lot of protesters nowadays operate. They go around the streets, they heckle our lawmakers when instead of being having such a lack of decorum, they should wait 2 to 6 years to actually elect someone that actually has their policies in mind.
For sure, but I
And,
mean, I think
they
even
just
just
can't be patient.
the heckling itself doesn't help because even with like we were saying with the Evergreen College case, like if you're going to force people out of your college because their skin color, even if they agree with you and they're because Evergreen College is a very liberal college, but some people you agree with, we're going to force you out of this. They're going to think maybe I don't agree with you anymore. People like Brett Weinstein, who got pushed a little bit further to the right because he was a Bernie guy. I think with the whole recently, I think it was Ted Cruz that got yelled out of a restaurant in Washington D.C.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You know,
and
so
then the protesters wrecked the restaurant as well.
oh, they did. I didn't even hear about that. But I think well, I mean, much anyone comes and yells at you because even Ted Cruz was saying on some interview, he's like, I read all the bad comments on Twitter. He's like, the clever ones we share them around the office, but then the funny ones that are like F you. It's like okay, you're special. But if anyone comes up to you and just starts screaming at you, you're like with. I can't remember what it was a couple months ago, but it was they're outside I think Mitch McConnell's house and they're harassing his wife and things like that. That's going to make like with Kavanaugh. That's not going to make them support you.
Yes,
It's going to put like Kavanaugh was pretty moderate in a lot of his cases. He of course is right leaning, but he had a lot of moderate decisions. But if anything, now you're pushing him further and further right. Like Trump got pushed. I don't think he was conservative when he ran. I think now he's definitely Republican. I think he was a lot because he was rich Democrat, wasn't he?
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a Democrat for a long time.
I think even when he was running, he didn't expect the backlash. I think it was just so much of the anger that pushed him. Okay, well, I'm going to go more conservative now. And like with Cruz is if I think the best thing to do would be to like, okay, I get the heckling, you're angry, but what's going to make a bigger difference? Go to someone and just screaming at them, or just sitting down and say, hey, listen, I think you're wrong, and here's why. Because if anyone can do that to you, it just shows okay, they're confident, they believe what they're saying, and they're authentic rather than just they're angry. Because even at the whole thing where they're just chanting shame on I think it was Lindsey Graham was doing a speech, they're just chanting shame at him. That's when it's like you're not changing anyone's mind. You're setting their rules in stone because you are now forcing them to like you know what, even if I agree with you, I don't like you, and now I'm gonna do this just to spite.
Yes, and if I were to go to some place and someone were to treat me with disrespect, I don't think that person would have any right to request me to treat them respectfully, even though I'm still going to because I'm a nice guy. But still, they go and they heckle these people, and then they expect their positions to be heard, and that's just not how it works. What they need to do is they need to go through the proper channels and be very polite and show that they are worthy of having their positions being respected
For
rather
sure.
than
For me, it's like my thing with respect. You probably have a higher standard than I do because my bar of respect is I go in treating everyone with a high level of respect, and if they earn more, I'll absolutely give them. My first boss when I worked in fast food, he has all my respect ever. He was a great guy. But some people like some teachers were like, okay, I respect you, and then they lose that respect. And I treat people with the respect what they treat me. I go in with everyone. Everyone give them a high respect. I treat them with respect. I try to be nice to them, and then if they reciprocate, we're fine. If people are mean or whatever, it's like, okay, I'm either just going to not speak to you anymore. I'm out. I don't want to talk to you again. Or it's okay, I'll be rude back. But the whole thing is, I get I get the whole point of we really want change, so we're gonna show them how emotional and powerful we are. But again, especially when it's in a mob, the only power comes from the group, rather than each person can want all the change they want. But it's like that's why when a lot of people, it's like we interview people in a crowd, someone go up to the crowd. Why are you here today? You're chanting cops and KKK or cops and Klan are one and the same, whatever it was. And it's like, what do you mean by that? Oh, I don't know. We're just chanting it. Or what do you mean by that? I'm not going to talk to you. It's like if you can't hold your own ideas, I don't think you deserve to hold collective ideas, because collective ideas should be a bunch of people who agree on the same thing coming together, rather than the collective telling you what to believe.
Yeah, certainly.
I guess this whole cruise thing. Sorry, I'm going to finish real quick. But yeah. I think the whole thing with the heckling, that helps nobody, because even if that was my own, if that was anybody, if I agree with the hecklers, I'd be embarrassed. I'd be ashamed, because that'd be okay. I really would want. Let's say with the whole Kavanaugh thing. Let's say I'm on their side. It's like I would don't want Kavanaugh in there. I'd be all for it. I'm all for the investigation. Let's have this investigation. Let's see what we find. Talk to all the witnesses. You got the 9 sworn statements, the 10th written in, all under penalty of felony or perjury. Got us confused, but you have I was all for it. If this happened, if we can prove it happened, or anyone is saying it happened other than the accusers, let's definitely not let Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court. But I'd be so ashamed if people that thought the same as me were going out and just targeting these poor senators. Like if they're going out to Collins and just attacking her, or the thing with Flake in the elevator. He looked so defeated because look at me. It's like, I don't matter to you. It's like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm saying that we should make, even like Mitch McConnell was good at clarifying. Is like I was saying that we should absolutely hear what she said, and if there's anything there, let's go for it. And because I was talking to someone before, and they said, doesn't the number of accusations matter? There was 5. Don't they all matter? The number of accusations. It's like, no, 1,000 fake to me wouldn't matter, and 1 true one to me wouldn't matter. And I think I don't get the mob mentality. I understand we all want this collectively, but the force behind it, when it's physical force or intimidation, no one wants that. If that was people I agree with, I would be so ashamed to say I'm with them, because I would want to say I'm with the people who are being logical and thinking it through and trying to do things the right way, even if it's slow and painful.
Yes, certainly. So, did you have any other big political issue that you'd like to talk about?
Not off the top of my head. Are there any you can think of right now?
Well, recently, this is sort of political, also a bit of on the religious side. There's, of course, big allegations in the Roman Catholic Church about,
I heard about that.
Yeah, about, of course, widespread widespread allegations that there
Sexual
may be
misconduct, I think is a good way to put it.
Professional misconduct. Okay, some people may have been abusive of their religious authority on some very high levels, and this, of course, is opening up a whole bunch of questions on how a lot of other individuals have been covering this up inside the Roman Catholic Church. And there's even some people suggesting that they should stop having vows of celibacy so that the priests can marry. But that's a different concept. What's your take on that?
On the celibacy or on the just general accusations and
both misconduct?
Of them. On the celibacy, I don't know enough about that. I don't see why priests can't marry, because even in the biblical text, the thing is, I'm not sure. I think that might have been a Levite law, but as far as I'm aware,
it's a Roman Catholic tradition.
Okay, so it's not in the text?
Well, in fact, if I look at the text, there's actually a part where it says the exact opposite. But
that's what I thought was at some point it was. Even as it was said in Genesis, it's not right for man to be alone, because the whole thing is, if you, like with some monks, they are able to because they devote their life to it, but it's not they choose. I'm going to do that. I think for the priesthood, they go in with that notion, but I don't think they should force people to be celibate. If someone goes into the priesthood and says, you know what, for the rest of my life, I'm choosing to abstain. I completely support that. If someone was saying, listen, I'm going to be a priest, I'm going to have a consensual religious marriage and the union of two souls, I also support that. I don't see what's wrong with that. And for the misconduct in the church in general, it's just disgusting. And the way the Pope responded to that was really lackluster for me, because he was saying, "Oh, Satan is just doing his work." It's like, this was under your watch, and he may have knowingly covered a couple of these accusations up. That's when he is taking no fault. He's like, "No, I didn't do anything." This should have been him coming out. He should have done a Kavanaugh here, where he comes out. He's so upset by this. We're gonna stop this. We're gonna get to the bottom. And any misconduct in the house of God should not stand. I don't see why he was deflecting. I get it's embarrassing, but he should have said we could have done better, and then completely hunt and obliterate this, because this has no place in the house of God.
Yeah, and what I would say is this also brings big questions on, of course, the idea of abuse in religious structures, because, of course, this isn't just something that's exclusive to Roman Catholicism. It's been relatively common that some individuals who have either social power, political power, or religious power over others tend to abuse that. And, of course, there needs to be a high moral standard. And unfortunately, it seems that in some cases, this standard has not been enforced.
I think so as well. Apparently, I've heard there's been a lot of repressed homosexuality in the Catholic Church. I think it's part of the celibacy. I don't think it's inherently that gay people are more prone to be sexual predators. I think that's completely untrue. I know some people push that message. I don't believe in that. But I think just it's been a huge issue of the cover, because it's been going on for decades, and this is covering it up. It should have been. I don't know. It's just hard to. I don't know much about this in terms of the details, but I just can't believe this was going on for so long. And because it's not unique to the Catholic Church, it's not unique to schooling. There is misconduct in everything that involves humans, because humans are naturally flawed.
Yeah, of course.
I just think that this should have been something where they come out guns blazing against this, because it came across as the Pope wanting to minimize this and move on, which this should have been the fire under the seat to, we're going to end this. This will not happen in our church, and we are going to stop this and make an example of anyone who chooses to do this under our name.
Yeah. So what's your opinion on priesthood in general?
On priesthood, I tend to respect priests. They spend their life doing that, or pastors. I'm not quite sure. Okay, I definitely value the priesthood, same as I would with any person in authority, in terms of any religious structure, or even in education and stuff like that. People that have earned their title, I tend to respect them more than people who are people who are have not, like their underlings. Of course, I respect everyone as much as I can, but people who have earned it, like priesthood, I tend to value that, but I don't know enough about it to I don't exalt the banner of priest. I tend to naturally respect priests, same as I would with educators. But I don't.
But are you familiar with the disagreements between Catholics and Protestants as to priesthood?
I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
You're familiar with that?
I'm pretty sure. Yes.
Okay.
'Cause I know it doesn't. Was it Protestantism that came with Martin Luther?
Yes, I would say, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you're that familiar with it, if you had to ask that question, but I think what a lot of Protestants in not just the U.S. but elsewhere in Europe, and just Protestants anywhere, a very common thread among modern Protestants is the idea of universal priesthood, which is, of course, different from that of a special priesthood as held by the Roman Catholics.
Okay, yeah, I'm not as familiar with that as I thought I was. I'm not big in the terms of the church dynamics. I've never really I've been to some Lutheran churches, but I've always been non-denominational. I don't have a lot of in the internal knowledge or intricacies of the papacy, and I'm especially not much familiar with Protestantism.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's not a good topic right now then.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we'll close out for now, and I'll tell the audience have a good day. If you'd like to talk to me and be and have a discussion with me about politics, religion, anything really, I'm happy to do so. And I will be seeing you all next time.
All right, goodbye, everybody.